All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and welcome. We're very excited to be hosting our first Open Data Day webinar, Environmental and Sustainability Data for Decision Making. I know we're really excited to get to the Q&A at the end of the webinar, so we're going to just go ahead and dive right in. The first step is to do a refresher on Zoom for those of you who have never used it before or would like a refresher. You'll notice that you guys were muted when you came on and had your cameras turned off. That's because we have a lot of guests today and we want to make sure that everyone has a positive experience. But you will have time to have your questions answered. So if throughout the webinar at any point, and particularly for the Q&A, if you have comments, questions, please drop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We do have people monitoring, so we'll make sure that if we don't get to your question at the webinar, we will send you a written response. So first thing, I want to introduce our speakers. My name is Corey Filio, and I am the Communications Coordinator for the Resource Watch Project. And I'm going to run through the agenda as well as our speakers here today. First thing is we're going to hear a little bit from our speakers in the panel. Then we're going to do a demo of the Resource Watch platform. And then we're going to open it up to a Q&A panel with our experts. So first thing, let's hear from Chisato about OpenAQ. Chisato, would you like to share your screen and talk a little bit more about OpenAQ?
Sure, happy to. Let me turn my video on. Oh, for some reason it's saying that I can't share my screen.
Here, let me stop mine and then you should be able to start.
Great.
There we go.
Great, perfect. So thank you so much, Corey and Anders, for this invitation. I'm really excited about this opportunity to talk a little bit about OpenAQ. So my name is Chisato Calvert, and I'm the Deputy Director of OpenAQ, a nonprofit that is focused on fighting air pollution with open data and community. So as many of you know, air pollution is a large public health issue and human rights issue of our time, causing 1 out of every 8 deaths on the planet. And some of the challenges related to open data around this is, one is the lack of access to air quality data, particularly in the most polluted places, as well as inconsistent and temporary air quality data formats. And these challenges really prevent civil society from taking adequate action to improve air quality in their local communities. And so in order to really tackle these challenges, we've created the OpenAQ platform, which essentially takes disparate air quality data from across the world and harmonizes it into an open, transparent, and accessible, universally formatted data platform. And this platform can be accessed and utilized downstream from a number of different users, including media, data journalists who are really interested in covering data-driven coverage around air pollution, government and policy folks, researchers who are dedicated to really advancing our understanding of public health and air pollution exposure, private sector, those that are engaged in low-cost sensing spaces, and of course in education to really share and raise social awareness around air pollution. So this is actually a map of the OpenAQ platform world map. So the dots represent where we currently collect air quality data from. And I will say for this platform, it is primarily government grade and some research grade air quality data. And so currently we're collecting over 500 million air quality measurements from across the world, from 130 data sources from 85 countries. And this platform is requested by 200 million people per year, data requests per year, as well as accessed by 162 countries. I also wanted to mention that in addition to the OpenAQ platform, we also organize OpenAQ workshops. And these workshops really serve as a platform for engaging diverse stakeholders. So we bring together journalists, we have software engineers, scientists and researchers, entrepreneurs who are really dedicated to understanding the local context of air pollution and doing a deeper dive on what the challenges and opportunities are in their local community. And together, we're able to explore the gaps within open data, how open data can actually spark new opportunities, and of course, to collectively brainstorm ways that we can fight air inequality together. And I wanted to highlight one particular example. This is a photo of our workshop in Accra, Ghana. And as a result of this workshop where we brought together diverse stakeholders, some of the key impacts have been the group committed to creating a community statement, really demanding increased coverage and frequency of air quality monitoring in Ghana. And this community statement was translated and also published as a call for action in Clean Air Journal. And as a result of this, bringing awareness to this issue, Columbia University donated air quality monitoring equipment to a local network in Accra, Ghana. And so this is a great example of how it's not just the OpenAQ platform, but at the heart of the work that we're doing is really connecting people from across the globe to really support one another so that we're able to collectively fight air inequality. And just wanted to show last slide for more information about OpenAQ, our website. And of course, we also have a very active virtual community on OpenAQ Slack. So we encourage you to join.
Thank you so much. That's really exciting. I mean, we're personally very proud to be partners with OpenAQ, and you guys will be seeing OpenAQ data featured very prominently on the Resource Watch site when we get to the demo. For those of you in attendance, please do remember that you can start thinking about questions for our panel now, and you can start putting them into the Q&A box at the bottom. But next, I want to let Stephen please share his screen so he can talk a little bit more about Open Knowledge Foundation.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name's Stephen Abbott-Pugh. I am the Content Development Manager for the Open Knowledge Foundation. Let me just share my screen here. Share and then go over. There's too many things all over each other. Right. So the Open Knowledge Foundation is a UK-based NGO that works all over the world. And our mission
Stephen,
is...
I don't know if we can see your screen or not.
Oh, okay, sorry. I press share. Oh, right, desktop.
There we are. Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
No
okay.
problem. We can see your desktop now.
So the Open Knowledge Foundation is a UK-based organisation that helps oversee and coordinate some of the efforts around Open Data Day. So I'm overseeing the Open Data Day website, and we're helping to connect people around that. We've been around for about 15 years. And over that time have done a huge amount of work around the importance of open knowledge and open data, working in various different spaces. So our team created the CCAN platform that's used by a lot of governments around the world to publish their data. We also run things like the School of Data Network, which helps train people in data literacy. And just so you can read it now, this is our new focus. This is our vision for the future about the importance of a fair, free and open future. So we are doing a lot of work at the moment on teaching and data literacy. We're starting a lot of work with lawyers in the UK who we think don't have the skills to use evidence from databases in their work. And we've done a lot of work with journalists in the past. But yeah, we are working in various sectors to try and help people to realize how they can use data in their work and how we can make sure that that's valuable. Just like I mentioned, we've also been in charge of various tools like CCAN and things like open spending, our frictionless data tools, which we're doing a lot of work on at the moment. So I can give people links to things later on. If you wanted to publish open data you collect, say around one of your Open Data Day events, or you're looking for data to find, we can help you to point towards resources like CCAN instances or places like datahub.io, where you can find data to use on in your events. Yeah, so the last 5 years, Open Knowledge has played this role, this coordinating role on Open Data Day. Open Data Day is happening on Saturday, so it's Saturday the 7th, although there's already events happening all over the world connected to it. And this year, we've managed, with the thanks to funders like Resource Watch and Datopian and HEVOS and the Open Contracting Partnership and others, we are running a mini grant scheme. So we're supporting about 65 events taking place all around the world. All of those events are along 4 tracks, one of which is environmental data, which we're really excited. We got a huge amount of responses. It's the first time we've been doing environmental data as a theme this year. So it's really great to see the amount of interest there. And yeah, so there'll be 65 events that we're supporting taking place all over the world, some of which are happening tomorrow and Saturday and coming up. Hopefully we can share all these slides later on, but there's just a list of links there for places where you can find out more information about Open Data Day, find out the events that are happening, or find out how, with help from the people who we work with at Dataopian, you can get more technical support for your event if you wanted to. So yeah, looking forward to everyone's questions and hope that's useful.
Very useful. Thank you so much, Stephen. I am going to go ahead and get back into our slides now. Great. Excellent. So you guys have heard from our panelists a little bit more, and we're very excited to have them here. We're grateful to have their time. And speaking of Open Data Day, that's kind of why we're here. We're here to talk about Resource Watch, and we're here to talk about open data and how open data can be used to influence decision making. I don't know how many of you are already familiar with the Resource Watch platform, but I'll give you a little bit of background. Since this is going to be a resource that we hope is useful to folks who are participating in Open Data Day or who are willing to use and able to use open data in their work. Resource Watch launched a little over 2 years ago, or close to 2 years ago, as the centerpiece of the World Resources Institute's suite of data platforms and tools. The World Resources Institute is a global environmental think tank, and it made a really big open data commitment to bring not only its research, but the research of its partners and people all around the world to share their data openly, to share their research openly. And so it kind of evolved into this really excellent project where we have a go-to resource for information for a ton of different types of users. Our role in this open data space is to collect, curate, and transparently share the information that these audiences need, like journalists or researchers, in order to influence these global decision makers that we're all trying to reach. And this idea came from the fact that there is too much data out there. The problem used to be that there wasn't enough information. That's not the case anymore. A simple Google search will turn up hundreds of thousands of results for any given topic. And so WRI wanted a way for people to have very quick and easy access to information that they needed. So our role is to bring data out of silos, bring people together around data. And that's been the inspiration for the platform, and that's what we're working on. That's our mission for Resource Watch. And we don't do that alone, certainly. We do this with a vast network of partners. You'll actually notice OpenAQ here towards the middle at the bottom. We're very excited to partner with them. And some of these people have provided technology, they provided data, they help us fund to keep this open resource growing and advancing. Because data is in flux constantly. Data is being updated, new data is being shared. And so we've created this living library. Right now we have 300 data sets that are global, 50 of which plus of those are near real time, meaning they are updating often enough that you can use them to monitor events on the planet as they happen. And these data sets are coming from a variety of different sources, everything from NOAA and NASA to global researchers to people at the World Bank. Our catalog is extremely diverse and covers every issue you see on the screen here, but more importantly, it covers the intersection of those issues. So while we have data on cities and water and energy, we don't just want people to be looking for data on cities, water, or energy. We want people to be asking questions like, where does the city get their water? Who has access? Who's paying for the energy? And how do we find those kind of questions? Because we find that intersectional solutions for these giant global problems require intersectional data overlays and questions and answers. So without further ado, I'm just going to throw us into the demo of the platform itself. You can feel free to join on Resource Watch and follow along. Otherwise, you can check out Resource Watch on your own later. It's resourcewatch.org, and this is our homepage. So this is a very easy to navigate site. We've put a lot of time into it, and we're always improving. So if throughout this you have comments or questions, please do share them in the Q&A as well. But you'll see some of our latest stories here, our featured dashboards, and a couple of different ways that you can dive into the data. First and foremost, we're going to look at dashboards. Our dashboards are our attempt at curating data for people who might not be as familiar with certain topics. So we have these massive global issues: food, energy, climate, forests, water, society, ocean, and cities, right? There's a ton of information on these topics. And what we've done is we've tried to break it down into a number of different interesting data sets, facts, visualizations, and background so that anybody can try and explore any issue and feel confident with the information they're receiving. And it's not just these large global issues. We've done a lot of work to start our dashboard gallery. And these are pieces that have been created in conjunction with the Resource Watch team with a number of partners or within people at WRI. Our first example of this, we're very proud, we just launched our air quality page last week. And this was done in conjunction with the WRI air quality team, and it features pretty heavily OpenAQ data. But this is going to be a go-to resource for everything you need to know background on emissions, pollution, clean air, the causes, and potentially the solutions. So what you'll find in any of these dashboards is data visualizations, information, statistics. And it's important to note that everything you see on Resource Watch is open source. So you'll see these little share arrows everywhere throughout the site, and it's as easy as hitting copy link or copy the embed code to share these maps, these charts, and these pieces of information. We've created this as an open tool for all of you, and we want that to be something that's useful. But this is our curated information. If you're just looking for raw data, then you can check out our data tab. In particular, we've broken this down into two different areas: near real-time data and the main catalog. I'll show you our near real-time first. This here is a selection of our near real-time data. As I mentioned earlier, we have over 50 data sets that fall into this category, meaning they're updating everywhere from every 15 minutes to every month. And they fall into a number of different categories: land, water, air quality. All of this is coming from OpenAQ, climate, humanitarian issues, and global hazards. I'm just going to turn on the fires layer really quickly. And this data is coming from NASA. And this is updating often enough that you can watch blazes as they happen. You know, we typically see a lot of agricultural burning in Africa. When there's wildfires happening in Brazil, or when there's wildfires happening in Australia, we're able to track that activity. We're also able to overlay it with contextual information, in this case, forests or population, so that you can get an idea of, you know, where these fires are going to be impacting agriculture, impacting communities, and so on. Under climate, we have a really interesting real-time data set on coral reef bleaching. And this is coming from NOAA. So like I said earlier, our data sets come from a number of different sources and a number of different resolutions and dates of update. We keep our catalog incredibly active and updated, but this data set is updating quite frequently. And when you overlay that with the known locations of reefs as a contextual data set, you can very quickly see areas that are being subject to conditions of bleaching. And what this is a very powerful visualization tool. Resource Watch is primarily a visualization tool because we believe it's, you know, important to justify your arguments, to bring these visuals to stakeholders, to invite people into the conversation, and having these visuals on hand is incredibly powerful. But if you're interested in raw data more generally, you can go up to data and you can either click on data or go to explore, which takes you to our full catalog. This is where you're going to find our 300 data sets, including all of our near real-time information. And this is a lot of information to dig through, right? But we've made it fairly easy to find what you're looking for in our filters. So you can search by topic, by data type, frequency, or time period. So you might be looking for historical data, future data, geospatial, vector, whatever it is you're looking for, we can help you find it. For example, if you click on biodiversity, this automatically filters out all the data sets that have been tagged as being relevant to biodiversity. So right here, you'll see this is from UNEP. It's the biodiversity intactness data set. And you'll see the legend down here at the bottom of the screen, which tells you what you're looking at. But if this is what you're looking for, you can hit the share button, copy it, embed it, and this will save the map at whatever zoom level and layer sharing you had created. So it's your own custom visualization and map. There's a number of other ways that you can customize the Resource Watch map. You can change the base layer to be light. We have a satellite image. We have a terrain option. We can change the different labels. Again, this is a visualization platform, and so anything we can do to increase the value of the visualization, we're going to do. And it's not just single data sets. I think a priority for us is the idea of overlays and these intersectional solutions to problems. So I'll just show you one or two very quickly. I'm searching right now for nitrogen dioxide. And this was an overlay that was found by one of our researchers in the data team just by exploring. So I do encourage all of you to take the time, if you have it, and explore this really excellent catalog, because there's a ton of connections to make and relationships that you can discover simply by overlaying visuals. And what you'll see here is a very thin stripe of nitrogen dioxide concentration. This data is coming from the Tripoli satellite. It's a monthly aggregation of NO2. And we see this same exact stripe month over month. So it's a very consistent plume of NO2. And if you're wondering what is causing that, you can overlay data that we have on industry. In this case, shipping. And you'll see just these text tags bring up a ton of different data that's really relevant. In this case, we're looking for commercial shipping lanes. And when you turn this on and off, you'll see that the nitrogen dioxide overlaps quite nicely with these concentrated shipping lanes, because you have a very small area with a lot of traffic. And the emissions from that, the emissions of this particular industry, are visualized at the satellite level, and that's really exciting. And with this same data set, we can also see we can see more interesting things. Every data set on the site is multifunctional. There's not just one overlay. Right now, I'm turning off the filters and I'm going into our global power plant database. This is our #1 data set on Resource Watch. This is a WRI original data set, and it is the most up-to-date, free and open source on where the world gets its power. Anytime you see this icon here, that means there are multiple layers for each data set. If you click on it, you'll see what's available. In this case, we're looking for coal-fired power plants. And we've moved over here to India because as you zoom in, and you can get as granular as the data will allow on the map, we can go in as far as makes sense. And you'll see the overlap here between these plumes of nitrogen dioxide and these coal-fired power plants. So you're then able to take this visual and say, we found a connection, what does that mean? You're able to do the research, you're able to bring this visualization into that and show people exactly what you're telling them is true. Go ahead and clear this off. I know this is a lot of information. And so the thing that we're trying to do is make data accessible. That can be very difficult with a full catalog of 300 data sets. And so briefly, I want to highlight the blog. This is where we're doing these overlays for you. We're trying to find these connections. We're trying to reveal insights. Anything really from airports that could be underwater from climate change scenarios and rising oceans to power plants and water stress in areas that experience extreme flooding. We have an endless resource of information here, and we want to make sure that this is something that's useful to you, that's used by you, and we want to help curate that through the process. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen back to the PowerPoint real quick. Just give me one moment. Okay, 1 second. There we are. Okay, great. And so one of the main questions we get asked on Resource Watch is, how is this translating into impact, right? This is a data library, it's a living resource. And what we do on our team is we try and figure out how this data, this raw information, translates into change and impact. We do that in 2 different ways: user interviews and use cases. And I can give you a couple of examples of how we've seen this information be used for positive change. The first one that comes to mind is this organization, Save the Children. They used Resource Watch data on floods to visualize and analyze flood patterns in Bangladesh. This helped them as they're looking at the map to understand where to best allocate their resources to ensure that the people in need got the best quality healthcare in the most timely way. And sometimes, I'm sure as you all know, open data takes a little bit of pushing. We need to follow this through the data pipeline. We need to make sure that we're getting to the impact. And we do that with hands-on trainings on our site and on how to use open data generally. One recent example came from a workshop we conducted as a team in Jakarta, Indonesia. This was a 2-day data journalism training to influence journalists so that they could then influence decision makers in country about the impact of environmental issues on their communities. And one of the journalists actually produced a really exciting 8-part series on the impact of sea level rise on coastal communities in Java. So she had created 8 different stories, mini documentary, really intense visuals like the one you see here of water coming up and swallowing entire towns and homes. And this was all based off of data visualizations. This is one example of a visualization used by that reporter. It shows open data on seasonal and permanent water coverage from 1994 to 2018. So you can see over time where waters have risen, where they've risen, and who's going to be impacted by that. And I know this was very quick. The goal here is to get everyone into the Q&A because I know there are a lot of questions for our experts. But one thing I do want to highlight, because we get this question every time, is how to come back to Resource Watch as it's an open source tool and cite the data you find here. You can do that by citing the original data source, followed by access through Resource Watch. Since this is an open tool, we want to be sure to keep in touch with you and keep in touch with your work as you use this data in your own work. So if you have any comments, questions, ideas on the platform on how you could use this outside of the webinar scope, please do reach out. The contact info is here. It's also going to be shared in an email to you after the webinar, along with a recording of this session. So at this point, we're going to move to the panel, and I'm going to hand it over to Anders Peterson, our Resource Watch Director, who will introduce himself and our panelists.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Corey. Thanks for walking us through. Thanks, Cesaro and Stephen, for providing these kickoff thoughts on how open data can provide a really tangible impact around environmental and sustainability issues. So I'm Anders Peterson. I'm Resource Watch Director, and I'm really pleased to have this conversation around the Open Data Day, which has been a reoccurring event over, I believe, nearly at least maybe 10 years or so. What I would love for us to do is to use this time to ask to have everyone who's attending ask questions. I would highlight that we already have a very lively Q&A happening. We've had a number of questions already both asked and answered from Stephen and Cesaro. What I would like to do is to get us off the ground, ask a couple of really quick questions. So Cesaro, you described the sort of really the potential wins from working on air quality issues. You are talking about a target of preventing 17,000 deaths annually. And what I've noticed from following sort of OpenAQ is there's really seemed to be this like surge in interest around open air quality data. It's just a couple of months ago that OpenAQ was awarded the New York Times 2019 Good Tech Award. So congratulations on that. So I think my question to you would be sort of why this attention to air quality now and not sort of 5 years ago? Is it the centers on the ground that's making a change? Is it decision makers who are waking up to see that this is something that they could do something about it? Is it citizens demanding actions? Where do you see that groundswell of interest coming from?
Yeah, thanks so much for your question, Anders. Yeah, I will say that, in terms of why now, my first reaction really is that it hasn't been a particularly sudden spark of interest, but really a result of a gradual and growing recognition that air pollution is one of the greatest public health challenges of our time. So I think that it's a very multifaceted multi-pronged, gradual, collaborative effort and initiative to reach this point. In particular, you know, from the research side, there's the global burden of disease study. There's been increase in studies showing health disparities caused by air pollution exposure around the globe. The role of social media is quite prevalent as well in really growing social awareness, not only within local communities, but also trying to galvanize support internationally around these issues. And of course, civil society really playing a more active role in wanting to push open data in their local communities. And as you mentioned, low-cost sensors is a space to allow for that citizen science. So I actually wanted to give one example of sort of that ripple effect. In 2008, the US Embassy in Beijing started to tweet outdoor air quality information. And this sensor was actually attached to the roof of the US Embassy there. And these tweets actually enabled third-party software developers to start scraping the data and converting that dry technical information and actually creating more sort of user-friendly applications. And so this is sort of the transformation where, for the first time, Beijing residents started to see that there is real-time data. They were able to actually understand more about the air that they were breathing because it was more accessible to the public. And as a result of that, the media started to cover the issue within Beijing and also internationally. And you've probably seen Beijing be ranked one of the highest polluted places in the world. That started from planting the seed, you know, back in the mid 2000s with this social media and with this air quality sensor. And then as a result of the media coverage, really seeing that NGOs and nonprofits really catalyzing how to publicize the data. And eventually the Chinese government responded by creating a more stringent air quality standard and really promoting open data practices. And now the country actually runs the world's largest air quality monitoring system. And so I think that this is a great example of how, you know, just one new dot of open source air quality data on the map can really transform and capture the attention of not only a local community, but the world. And I think that this, you know, people start calling this the Beijing model. And I think that this really serves as an inspiration for other communities around the world who currently don't have open data to really be able to push for that. And there is hope for change and there's evidence of that. So wanted to share that example as well.
Great, thanks so much, Cesaro. So Stephen, I wanted to ask you a question as well. At Open Knowledge Foundation, you've over the years supported hundreds of grantee applicants on Open Data Day. So every year you receive this swath of applications from groups on the ground who want to use everything from financial data to environmental data to drive change on the ground. So I guess my question would be if we look at environmental and sustainability data more specifically, what kind of change do you see happening over the years in how groups on the ground are using this data? And if we took a look at the applicants this year, what does it tell us about what direction we're going at in terms of informing decision making on environmental and sustainability issues on the ground?
Okay, sure. Thanks, Anders. So to answer those questions, I mean, the good thing for us is that over the years that we've been helping with Open Data Day, we've seen a growth in the number of events where people are using actual data that's released or that's available, and a kind of decrease in the amount of events where people are just saying, we desperately need data, and they're advocating for data to be released, which is really great to see. And that's generally across the world. But if we look, for example, at what people have applied for in the environmental data track that we're doing this year, there's a kind of interesting split with some of the countries. There are places, say like Mexico, for example, I think Guatemala as well, where there's enough data being released by those governments that what people are trying to do is show the connection between the projects that the government supporting and their environmental impact. So they're able to do that with data because some of those governments are a bit further along, the shift towards open data. They're releasing more data themselves. So that has generated a different type of event. People are more engaged. There's more of a community already. There are still some events that we're supporting where they're in places that people are working hard to try and get any data released, which is sad to see. But like I said, those are happening less and less. And there's a really interesting kind of mix this year of people using mapping. So the 4 tracks that we've got are open mapping, environmental data, data for equal development, and tracking public money flows. And so we've supported especially ones that cross over some of those boundaries. So for example, there are things taking place in places like Ghana and places like Tanzania, where people are trying to use drone mapping or trying to use mapping that they're doing on the ground in Tanzania to show the environmental impacts. So there's this interesting mix between countries where people maybe are focused a bit more on corruption and how governments need to change what they're doing in the face of environmental data, and there's more data available, and other places where people in Kenya, people in Tanzania, people in Ghana are trying to show the environmental impact that's already happening in their communities. And some of them are doing that in new ways. Some have tools available via OpenStreetMap and work that's already been done. But in a lot of those cases, people are having to try and generate the data sets themselves or trying to map areas that aren't sufficiently mapped at the moment. So yeah, we hope those events all go really well. Yeah, it's be exciting to see some of the work that comes out of those.
Great, Stephen. So I noticed that you mentioned that we are starting to see progress in the sense of we're seeing less applicants who are asking for data, and we're seeing more applicants who actually have the data, and they now need to derive change and decisions with that data. And so I think that maybe begs the question, which I think the open data community has maybe struggled a bit with over the last couple of years, which is to say, once we get from asking for the data to actually having the data, there's been maybe a recognition that just getting the data into public domain doesn't necessarily drive decision making overnight. So I guess, and that's a question for both of you, Chisaro and Stephen, is when we have the data, in order to get to actual making sure that decisions are made in a more informed way to shape better environmental policies, what is it actually that connects the dots from the data getting published to changes in decision making? Is it visualizations? Is it high-powered analysis? Is it actually having citizens asking more informed questions? What are the drivers that actually makes us get data to changes in decisions?
Shall I go first? I can go.
Sure.
So yeah, you're right that there has been that kind of growing realization in the community, and that there should be a lot more focus on the activities that happen after data is released, or things like you're doing here, which is brilliant, to showcase platforms. There's so many portals and platform spaces where data lives, but the work that people thought they were doing was releasing the data in the first place, when actually our team has always found that there's so much work to do after data is released to help people understand what's there, to help people even realize that it's been released. A lot of people don't understand what the term open data means. And it can be quite confusing to find things, and especially when organizations, governments, and people don't tell you how you can use that data, you're also at risk of getting in trouble if the licensing isn't right and isn't open as we'd like it to be. So yeah, I mean, we've done a bunch of work, like I said, working with journalists and trying in different sectors to help people. But any of the good examples where open data has made a big impact, I think have had a lot of elements of a lot of things Anders mentioned, that if you can get government action to happen because the media and civil society organizations work together and show the value of the data in the first place, then it works brilliantly. And it can really help to impact on different issues, but it's so different in different areas. We've seen quite a lot of success and projects we've done in the past around governments in South America, where there's been really close work when they've released budgets and they've released budget data, having civil society organizations and people who know how to use that data off the back of that. But a huge amount of work had to go in to help people and to generate that demand and to build some of the tools. But it took patience and input on all sides, I think. So having a real community of people that's not just people who care about open data, but people from government and civil society and people who understand those issues is really important.
Great.
Yeah, I very much echo what you just shared, Stephen. And I think one of the biggest observations from our work at OpenAQ has been, it's been really inspiring to see that from the civil society standpoint. So for example, software developers from particular countries where there aren't currently open air quality data, they would approach us and say, hey, you know, why isn't our air quality data available on the platform right now? And so usually we think about sort of this sort of top-down approach of like government really taking a strong role, but the way that we've seen it in particular over the past few years is that civil society is pushing for this data and wanting to create, you know, innovative solutions, developing mobile apps. We see journalists who want to use data-driven journalism to actually shift the way people think about public health and air pollution. We have educators who want to show, you know, raise awareness, and sort of as a result of that engagement of civil society, and not just within the community, but kind of cross collaboration between different international communities, we started to see actually governments, including the government of Iceland, saying, we want to open our data, how do we do it? And so it's one of those things that we might think of it as a reverse, but there really is a power of the way that civil society is really being able to access and utilize that data in ways that is just more digestible and more relatable, and kind of humanizing air pollution beyond sort of the scientific realm, beyond sort of the technical realm. And I think that sort of translation piece is really important, and how that's translated, I think, it varies based on community, based on need, based on community input, and what really makes people tick. But that translation piece is really important to making that shift to make, you know, eventually a policy change or a commitment to action actually take place.
Great. Thanks, Chisato. So we are continuing to seeing lots of questions in our question and answer section, and a lot of them are also being answered. I do want to highlight a couple of them that's been asked. So I'd emphasize two questions, and I'll sort of slightly rephrase them to make sure that they're useful for everyone. But Osama Abulita is asking about how to approach the question of essentially making governments trust open data sources. If you have governments that don't have good air quality data themselves, how do you, for example, or other sustainability data, how do you make that government make use of, for example, global data sources from NASA or others? So that's question one, and those are for both of you. And then the other question I would highlight from our public Q&A is the concept of citizen scientists, and how citizen scientists are able to advance these conversations. Does citizen scientists have merits? Do they have things to contribute, for example, in bringing own measurement data that's not coming from official government sources? So those are the two questions I would highlight, and I'll ask both of you, feel free to pick one or both to answer. But Chisato, do you want to go first this time?
Sure, yeah, happy to. I can answer the question about citizen science because that's definitely top of mind right now. So in answer to that, so, you know, as I mentioned in the presentation, right now, OpenAQ relies heavily or mostly on government grade data. And that kind of limits in terms of the scope of air quality data available. We actually conducted a global assessment of air quality, and we found that only half of the world's governments actually produce air quality data. So that's essentially 1.4 billion people around the world that don't have air quality data in their local communities. And so we asked the question, well, how do we fill that gap? Why does this exist? What kind of infrastructure is needed? And so I think citizen science is actually a big part of that answer. And so we have started to pilot a low-cost sensing air quality platform. And this will be a complementary platform that is separate from the government grade platform, but being able to engage citizen scientists, nonprofit groups, civil society groups who are essentially creating networks that are non-governmental air quality networks, and will be integrating that data onto this platform. So I think that from this point forward, just given that the low-cost sensing space is so, it's growing and there's much more interest in it, I think that there's a stronger role that citizen scientists can continue to play, not only within the US, but across the globe. And I think that that's a great and an important avenue to take when we're talking about being able to fill the data gap and also reaching communities that don't have access to air quality data at all.
Great, thanks for covering that, and excited to learn more about the low cost sensor platform. That sounds very exciting. Stephen?
So yeah, to answer Anders' other question about getting governments to use different sources of data, this is quite a challenge. My team in particular, we've done work looking at the challenges around people using citizen-generated data and combining it with what people would say was official sources. I mean, some of the very quick issues you get obviously is that governments don't make it easy to understand their data because the metadata that they release isn't good enough to combine it with other tools, other data sources, and that in a lot of cases, the licensing is very difficult to understand around them. I mean, the European Data Portal has a data licensing detector that, with a vast majority of their data sets, just can't tell you how something's licensed. My team in particular oversees the open definition, or we created the open definition, and there are a series of licenses that we would encourage people to use, which are a lot of the Creative Commons licenses or the open database licenses. So there's a big issue there on both sides. The government doesn't release their data in a way that everyone can reuse and test and combine with other things, and therefore if everyone's not using the same standards, the same metadata, then it makes it very, very difficult to combine with other things. But there is a lot of work going on in that. Specifically, you'll see a lot of things connected to the Sustainable Development Goals, and people saying that we really need everyone to be able to pull together on this, and to say that we are not going to solve this problem just with government data, and it's really important for other agencies and organizations to be able to combine information. So hopefully things are moving in the right direction with that. One thing to give you an example for is that in Europe at the moment, there's a big debate about high value data sets as part of the Open Data and Public Sector Information Directive that was passed last year. Under that, actually, which is really great for environmental data and geospatial data, all the government departments across all the EU member states by about May, I think in 2021, have to release data sets that are standardized across the whole continent. So that's the study is being done at the moment, and hopefully they'll sort out some of the licensing issues so they can all recommend to use the same thing. But there are kind of efforts going in where people are doing more and more to make sure that data that's released can be easily combined with other sources, whether they be from governments, other governments or other agencies.
Great, thanks, Stephen. So we got the EU work on high value data sets on the agenda as well. That's very good. So during this conversation, we've spoken a little bit about what are some of the new exciting technologies that can maybe be used to generate more data. Talked about for example, the low-cost sensors. If we look at sort of that the technical side is continuing to become more accessible, continues to become more affordable. There's another piece to to data-driven decision making, which has been, I think, discussed quite a bit in the open data community as well, and that's sort of the role of what are the data literacy needs, both with civil society, with academics, and inside government. As in, we can have all these technologies, but if the key staff inside government or activists do not have the skills to process, analyze, wrangle the data, then we won't get very far. So I wanted to ask both of you if you have thoughts about how data literacy can be, how you can work with data literacy within communities, if you agree that that's an important piece, and how you've tried to address that at Open Knowledge Foundation and at OpenAQ. Stephen, do you want to go first this time? Or Chisara?
Sure. A few things come to mind. One is, as I mentioned in my presentation, community-based workshops and trainings I think are really important, not only for, as you mentioned, digital literacy on an individual level, but I think collectively thinking about bringing together diverse stakeholders. So rather than siloing software developers who have this sort of adequate knowledge and obviously are experts within this field, but actually bringing those software developers in the same room as journalists, as entrepreneurs and researchers, and to be able to go through how to access the API, how to process the data, how to utilize it and use it for analytical purposes together, I think is really valuable, because that way there is not only individual literacy, but also a supportive network and community where you can continue to ask questions and be able to build upon the knowledge that you're building together. And so in response to that, we've actually continued to foster a really strong virtual community through the OpenAQ GitHub and Slack. And this is really an opportunity for community members around the world to really be able to not only learn about how to access the data, but also learn about what people are building using the data, how those new developments are progressing, how they might be able to contribute and add on to what someone is building, whether it's an application or a platform or a tool. And a lot of these kind of initiatives really spur from conversations that take place on our Slack channel and also on GitHub issues and things like that. And so I think that, for example, one of the kind of inspiring stories around kind of international collaboration is a software developer based in Mongolia actually chimed into Sarajevo in Bosnia. And in Bosnia at that time, the data collection process was manual. And so rather than having an automated system, it was obviously very time consuming. And it prevented a lot of the data from happening sort of in more real time. And so the support actually didn't necessarily come directly within Bosnia, but it was that connection that was made between the software developers in Mongolia, and that exchange that happened virtually is what allowed for that transformation from a manual air quality data collection process to an automated one. And so I think the power of just, in addition to the in-person workshops, to be able to connect people virtually is really important. And yeah, I guess another example is through our Slack, we had a software developer based in Australia who was really eager to contribute data on our platform about 2 months ago, particularly related to the fires. And so there's a relationship between certain, current events and people's civil societies wanting to push for open data and finding ways to do that. And so we want to be able to continue to be that support system, whether it's us having the answers for that sort of technical expertise or sort of relaying that information and connecting them to other people within the open A community in order to do that.
Great, thanks Chisato. Stephen, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said before, we've had an arm of Open Knowledge Foundation called School of Data that's done a huge amount of work on data literacy with journalists, in the hope that if people are exposed to open data or stories that are based on open data, that would increase awareness. And over the years in different places, that's really grown and become really, really useful. And there's been hundreds of trainings that have happened all over. But from our network, my team actually is very, very small, a very small central team that works globally. And we have a network that's been set up over the years of groups all over the world who do a huge amount of workshops and trainings and everything. And if you go on the Open Data Day hashtag, you'll see a bunch of them. You'll see people from Open Knowledge Belgium and Open Knowledge Somalia and Open Knowledge Nepal, all doing events taking place this week. But they do a huge amount of work. Often we can't be there to do the trainings ourselves, so we would help facilitate them. And just to add that some of the work that we're doing at the moment is a bit more UK focused, but it's looking at different sectors where people their work is increasingly being influenced by data. I mentioned earlier on we're doing a project with the Bingham Centre in London on training lawyers so they can better understand how decisions are made in kind of systems using data, so they can use those in cases. So that's something we're exploring at the moment. And another project that we're helping out with is the Carnegie Trust, which is a UK-based charity. It's funding work on libraries. So something that we think is really important. We put in some information to the UK is forming a national data strategy at the moment. Fingers crossed it'll actually happen. It's been very delayed and lots of ministers have changed over the last few years at the department in charge of this, but fingers crossed something might actually happen this year, is due to happen. So we said that more data literacy training was very important because it could help people develop new skills, find new jobs, be more ready to be able to take advantage of all the data that people are always talking about and to use the information that the government is releasing. So the application we did around libraries was to say that if libraries are being endangered, perhaps they could become something like a community data hub where you get a lot of training in how to use data from your area so that you can advocate better for understanding if there's particularly like lots of flooding in your area. Maybe you can use OpenAQ to prove, you can use Resource Watch to prove why that's happening, or you could use OpenAQ to find out about air quality in your area. So yeah, those are the things that we're trying to do to engage different audiences. But I definitely think that more data literacy training, because it's still the case that a lot of people I talk to don't understand what open data is. It's very important for people to try that in all sorts of different ways and sectors and areas.
Great, thanks very much, Stephen. It was wonderful to have a plug for libraries here coming around at the end. So we've come to the full hour, and so I do want to thank everyone for providing a very lively conversation in our chat. You are able to reach us at the Resource Watch team via emails from the registration. We are happy to answer any questions, and we are happy to also put you in touch with Stephen, who joined from Open Knowledge Foundation, and Chisato, who joined from OpenAQ. I want to thank our panelists for agreeing to join for this conversation. I think we had lots of great questions, and we had a really lively conversation around everything from data literacy here at the end to new developments in how to collect data, talking about how we can bring more data to decision makers to bring change on sustainability issues and really forge new ways of making decisions. So thanks everyone for joining this conversation. Thanks to Corey for organizing this webinar on the Resource Watch team, and we look forward to being in touch and to answer any questions you have. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks to Cesaro.
Hi guys, thank you. And we'll be sending a link out as well for the recording, so everyone will get that.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Cesaro.